And at the end, I will share the recording and all the slides with everybody who was on the invite list. All right, I first want to introduce our Migration Initiative team here. We have Daniel Olson, our Wildlife Migration Initiative Coordinator, Buck Eeler, the DWR GIS Manager. We have Liz Moore, the DWR Assistant GIS Manager, and also the Natural Heritage Program Coordinator. Myself, Jesse Shapiro, I'm the Migration Initiative GIS Specialist. And then we also have Rihanna James on our team, the Wildlife Migration Technician. We've also been working really closely with Spring ML, who is our Google contractor and helped us rebuild our wildlife tracker system in the Google Cloud environment. All right, Daniel, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So Jesse's our wizard, all things Google Cloud and database-wise, and she's going to be doing the bulk of the training. But I just wanted to provide everybody with a little background on Wildlife Tracker before we got started, so you could kind of see the need for it and kind of where it came from and how it's developing. So Wildlife Tracker is about a 5-year project now. It started around end of 2016. As a way to consolidate the wildlife data that we have and make it more useful to a wide variety of users. We wanted to make data available to not only our staff, but the partners that we work with. And we needed a good way to be able to view the data and query it. And so that's kind of where Wildlife Tracker came from. Started off with Sam Hall and Eric Edgley working on the problem, and they kind of developed a good model for how that might work, built it out on Esri products, and it showed a really good proof of concept that this could be a good thing. But then we started having problems because the more data we got, the more performance suffered, and we often had times when our database was down for days to weeks at a time, just because of the large amount of data we were trying to move around in the system. So that kind of set us to working on a better solution. We looked at the different options that were available, talked to various vendors, decided that moving the data into the cloud, where resources can be scaled on the fly, was probably the best option for what we were trying to accomplish. So we partnered with Google and one of their contractors that Jesse mentioned, Spring ML, to rebuild the database that we had in the cloud and hopefully improve the performance. So that's where Wildlife Tracker 2.0 came from, was this need to have a better system to move data. And so we just wanted to briefly go over how the data moves through the system that we've structured. I'm just going to kind of see how information is flowing, where it's coming from, where it's going to. So the point location data for all wildlife we're tracking originates with the collar or the tracking device on the animal. So those devices usually record those locations internally, and then some of them, a lot of the newer ones, have a way to upload that information through satellite networks and then into databases. So collar point location data is moved from the collar to satellites to databases, usually a manufacturer's database, and then we have pipelines set up that go and grab that data from the manufacturer's databases and pull it into Wildlife Tracker. So whether we're tracking deer, elk, sandhill cranes, pelicans, all this tracking data is all being pulled into one database, where it can then be fed into different applications where users can use it. So Wildlife Tracker is one of the applications where the data goes, and that allows you to see point location data for species and to be able to animate it and look at wildlife movement relatively easily. The new version of Wildlife Tracker will let you run large queries, and you can do animations of hundreds of animals. So it's pretty powerful. We've shifted the bottleneck on what our systems can do to your computer. So on the database side, it can run massive queries almost instantly. but it still takes some time for your computer to be able to display those. So now the performance bottleneck we have is on the user's end, but it's still very, very fast for most things that you'll be doing. We're also using the data to create products for landscape use planning. So creating maps of migration corridors from the movement data that can be used by BLM and Forest Service and other partners, so they know areas to be concerned with and to conserve. We're also very close to having a system that will provide real-time alerts to our users. So if you want to know when a mortality event occurs for an animal, or if an animal enters a certain area or leaves a certain area, Wildlife Tracker can now send you emails and text messages to let you know that those events happen. And so we'll be doing a training shortly after this one that will explain those new features of the alert system. And so Jesse's going to get into, and one last thing is one of the last components of Wildlife Tracker that still needs to be built out is data enrichment. So we want to be able to add contextual information to the point locations so we can analyze and understand what wildlife are doing. So what elevations are they using, what habitat types, how far are they from roads and water, that type of information. So that will be coming too in the near future. That additional information that will help us explain the movement patterns that we're seeing from the species that we're researching. Okay, Jesse, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So yeah, like what Daniel was saying, was we adopted this new Google Cloud solution to help us position our wildlife location data better. And this has also opened the door to more powerful technologies in cloud computing. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with what GCP is, the GCP or Google Cloud Platform is just a cloud computing platform that provides tools and services for users to like build out applications such as Wildlife Tracker. You can store data, you can process big data, and there's a lot of services for machine learning and a lot of other tools that we haven't even touched on yet. And throughout our experience so far, we found that GCP has been really easy to share data with. So in Wildlife Tracker, we can now work with out-of-state agencies and give them access to our GCP data. There's a really powerful combination of analytics and cloud computing, real-time data and access, so we can schedule all those data feed scrapes, and we can also access, I can get into our database whenever I want to. I don't need to have ask someone to get permission into it. And like Daniel was saying, it's really scalable. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the main components of our Wildlife Tracker system so that everyone kind of has an understanding of some of the cloud resources that we use. So the major component of Wildlife Tracker is BigQuery. So BigQuery is a serverless cloud data warehouse. And this is where all of our wildlife location data is stored. And it's stored between two different tables. The first is the collars table. So this is when we pull data from the collar manufacturers, it's scraping directly into this collars table, creating more of a centralized database for us. And in that collars table, it's all just location data. So all the GPS metadata that's recorded by the animals tracking collars. Then we have the animals table. So this is a separate table from the location table. And this table just describes the different attributes with the study animals. It includes the species, animal ID, collar ID, deployment dates, and recovery dates. And in Wildlife Tracker, what we're doing is we're joining both of these tables together so we can tell the complete story of an individual animal. And when we're joining these two tables together, I think it's really important to understand some of the primary fields that we're using. This includes the animal ID fields. So this is a unique ID that's assigned to each animal when the animal is first captured. It never changes, even if it receives a new collar. And we have a standardized naming convention for these animal IDs. So for example, we have MD20 F0001. This equates to a mule deer that was collared in 2020. We know that it's a female. And then those last four placeholders are just the numbers assigned sequentially as the animals are captured. Next, we have the color ID field. So this is assigned by the color manufacturers, and this just refers to the color. It's not really the actual individual animal, because one animal can have several colors over its lifetime. So for example, 038184. And one really great thing about GCP is its data redundancy. So we have all of this location data in BigQuery, but we also archive all the data in its raw format in Google Cloud Storage. And so this just helps is necessary for auditing, data retention, and disaster recovery purposes. Then we also use App Engine. So this is what Wildlife Tracker is really built upon and what you guys are interacting with all the time. And so our Wildlife Tracker was built using Angular JavaScript code, and then the actual mapping platform uses the ArcGIS JavaScript API. And then to help, since now we can run huge spatial queries, we have an additional library called DeckGL to help us just render those points on the actual mapping platform. Here's the technical architecture overview of Wildlife Tracker. As you can see, there's definitely some complexity to it. This is just merely a resource for you all. If you're interested in learning more about how all of these cloud resources are really integrated and work together, feel free to ask us at the end of this training session. But I wasn't going to go into the details of this. So right now we have one data feed that's running live into Wildlife Tracker, and that's from our Advanced Telemetry System, or ATS, color manufacturer. So every 30 minutes we scrape from the ATS database, and the GPS intervals for all of these ATS colors can vary between 10 minutes to 8 hours, and they can also be programmed remotely. Those locations are also batch loaded every 12 to 24 hours, so it's not necessarily in real time. Two other data feeds that we're working on, we're working on getting an Argos data feed. This is almost ready and nearly ready to be deployed. If you haven't contacted Liz Moore or myself, please do if you have transmitters that you are using with Argos. We can easily add those accounts to our data feed. The cellular tracking technology data feed is coming soon. If you're planning on using CTT, please let us know, and we will incorporate your transmitters into our data feed. And then on that note, I also just want to mention, if you are planning on using other color manufacturers and you want them to be on a live data stream into Wildlife Tracker, please reach out to us and let us know. These data feeds do take a lot of development time, so it's good to know what your project goals are in the future, so we can kind of incorporate that into our enhancement plans with Google. All right, Daniel, you want to talk about data sharing?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So real briefly, before we get to the demonstration, I just want to talk about the opportunities we have to share data with Wildlife Tracker now, and some of the things to consider when we're sharing this type of information. So the new version of Wildlife Tracker is set up really well to be able to partner with folks that you're working with. So we have now, each user can have a unique role that can specify what data they have access to in the database. So for instance, if you're working with somebody in your local area and they just need to see sage grouse data for that area, that's something that's possible with the new version of Wildlife Tracker. Those type of accounts can be set up quickly and easily. Everybody that Wildlife Tracker is password protected, so you need an account to be able to access it. Your state credentials will work, so you don't need a unique password. We just have to turn on your access. So you need to contact Jesse or myself or Buck to get access if you don't have access already. The data that's in Wildlife Tracker is protected under state law. So the coordinate data that's in Wildlife Tracker, we can't share that without a data sharing agreement. So as you're working with your partners, if you're in a situation where they need to have the download of the actual coordinate data that's in Wildlife Tracker, we'll need to set up a data sharing agreement to do that. It's not a really big deal, but that is necessary. For most cases, though, I think we can provide partners with viewing access so that that's not a big deal to set that up. That just takes a few minutes, and that will let them be able to view all the data that's in Wildlife Tracker. They just won't be able to download it. And then just a couple things as we're using the data. Obviously, the information in Wildlife Tracker can be somewhat sensitive, and we definitely want to only be using it for work purposes. So the data shouldn't be used for hunting, shouldn't be sharing location data with friends or family or colleagues to be able to harvest animals. If that type of situation occurs, that would be really give our program a black eye. It could really undermine the support that we have to do these type of calling efforts. So want to make sure that the data is only used for work purposes, not shared for hunting purposes or used to pick up shed antlers or that type of things, those type of things that would benefit you personally, but that aren't necessarily related to work. So those are just a couple of heads up. But as you're working with partners, things that can be shared really easily are heat maps. So that's a derived product from the coordinate data, just to show intensity of use within an area, but not necessarily point locations. Those maps are really helpful for most people we work with. So that would be the ideal thing to share with them. You might also need to share an animation that shows wildlife movement for a presentation or with partners. So that those type of things are good too. We just don't want to be downloading data and passing it around. Jesse, is there anything else you wanted me to cover on data access?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's switch gears and do a live demo of our Wildlife Tracker application. So to access Wildlife Tracker, you just open up a new tab in your web browser, and in the URL type wildlifetracker.utah.gov. And since I'm already authenticated through the Utah ID, it's not redirecting me, but if you didn't log in already through Utah ID system, it'll redirect you to that login page. And so the first thing that you're seeing in Wildlife Tracker is a splash screen, basically asking you to agree to the terms that Daniel described earlier. And if you agree, then you can get into the application. And we also have a feedback form here. Have you experienced any bugs or just want to provide your feedback? We'd really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of walk around the application and show you all the different widgets and tools that we have available. Some of this might be really familiar to a lot of you users, but hopefully it's not going to be too boring. So on the left-hand side, we have the ability to zoom in. We have a subtraction button here where you can zoom out. If you want to return to the Utah home extent, just click on the home button. If you have navigation enabled on your web browser, you can kind of roughly navigate to where your location is. Moving to the upper right-hand corner, this first widget that we have is the legend widget. And so this just tells you what each point represents on the map. So as we can see here, blue dot means it's an elk. Orange means it's a mountain goat. And with all of these widgets, you can actually drag it around the screen. If you grab the bottom right-hand corner of the widget, you can expand it and enlarge it. You can change the shape of it. And you can exit out of it with the X mark. So the next tool that we have is the layer list. So this is how you're controlling what is being displayed on the map. And so all the layers can be found within either a category or a subcategory. So if you expand this agriculture category, you can see we've got two types of grazing allotment layers. If you go to the habitat layer category, you can see we have three separate subcategories. And you can expand that out and see all the different types of mammalian habitat layers that we have available. And so all of these layers.
Maybe we need to go test drive vehicles.
So all of these layers are available to all Wildlife Tracker users. If you have a layer that you want to be added, just let us know. But please note that it would be available to everyone that has access to Wildlife Tracker. Okay, so let's expand this agriculture layer and try turning on a layer. So you just click on that check mark button. And as you can see, we've got our Forest Service grazing allotments. We can do a few things from here. You can go to the layer, and then in the menu button, you can change the transparency of it. Maybe you want it to fade in the background. You can disable the pop-ups. So if I try clicking on a polygon in that layer, nothing's gonna get selected. And if I enable it and I select a polygon, it's gonna trigger that pop-up window. You can also view the description. So if I click description, it's going to open up another tab in my web browser, and you can kind of get the metadata and description on the layer that you're displaying on the map. Okay, and then you can just turn that off. And then the other layer that we always have in the layer list is this last locations layer. So this is always going to be generated when you open up the Wildlife Tracker application. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's the last location of each animal in our database within the last 2 weeks. So if an animal died 3 weeks ago, it's not going to show what that last location was. It's only within the date range of the last 2 weeks. And so we can also change the transparency. We can zoom to it. You can disable pop-ups, but I am going to demo what you can do from the pop-up window from the last locations layer. And you can also do this from any queried Wildlife Tracker location data as well. So let's go to this black bear location here. I'm gonna close that. And so you can just click on a point of interest from that last locations layer. There's a few things you can do from here. You can just view the attribute information. You can zoom to it if you want to get a little closer. You can create an animation. So if I click create and animate, click create animate, it'll open up another window and for you to select a date range. We have some predefined date ranges, or you can set a custom one. So we're just going to try querying for the last 30 days. And then you click OK. And there we go, a quick animation of from the last location layer. Now, if I want to turn back on that last location layer, all you have to do is go to the layer list. As you can see, it got disabled because it was creating an animation. So you just turn that back on, and then we can maybe actually we want to create track lines instead of an animation. So you just click on that point, click track. Select your date range again. This time, let's go to the let's query for the last year. And just another way to quickly visualize your wildlife movement data. Now, if we're in the field and we're trying to navigate to this location, we can do a few things. We can click on the point of interest that we want to navigate to. We can open up this menu button. And if I click navigate, it's going to open up another tab in my web browser, and it's going to actually navigate to that location in Google Maps. And then you can click directions and navigate to it through Google Maps. If you're not using Google Maps, maybe it'd be helpful to just copy and paste that lat long. So you can just click on that point again, click on the menu button, and then click copy lat long, and then it's copied to your device, and then you can just paste it into whatever navigation platform that you're using. All right, let's turn back on that last location layer. You can also change the base map. We have a few different options. You can change it to imagery, light gray canvas. I'm going to keep it on the topo for the demo though. And then in the upper right-hand corner here, you have your user widget. So this just tells you who you're logged in as. If you've got admin rights, then you can access the admin portal through this widget here, or you can log out and log in as a different user. All right, next let's go over the query builder. So the query builder is found on the bottom of the screen here. And again, I'm going to drag it up, and then I'm going to grab the bottom right-hand corner just to expand it so I can see all of my options at once. So this first option in the query builder is the spatial filter. This is the default is to just query for all of the features that fall within the full extent of the map. The second option is to select features that intersect with the shape drawn. So if I select this option, it's going to trigger some different drawing tools. So we can draw a rectangle, a circle, or a polygon. So let's zoom in and just draw a quick polygon. So I will click polygon and click a point on the map and then drag my mouse and click every time I want to create a new vertice and just keep drawing and then double click to finish. Maybe I'm not super happy with this polygon. I can click the erase button and this time I actually want to draw a circle. So for the circle, you just click where you want the center of the circle to be. So let's have it be around the Woodruff Creek, and then you just drag your mouse out and then double click. And to clear that, just click the erase button. Okay, the last spatial filter option that we have available is selecting points that fall within a layer selected. So if I select this option, I first need to have a layer displayed on the map that's not this last location's layer. So I'm going to go to my layer list in the upper right-hand corner, go underneath the category boundaries, and select wildlife management units. And so let's say for this query, I want to find all the locations within the North Slope unit. What I would do is select the polygon of interest. And then that's going to trigger the pop-up window. And then I click this option, query here. And I know it worked once that polygon becomes highlighted on the map. All right, moving on to the next field, the species field. If you don't select anything in the species field, it's actually going to default to selecting all species. So if there's a specific species of interest, all you got to do is just check mark them. And I should also note that as you're going through these different fields, the following fields will filter based on that initial option that you selected. So let's say for species, I'm only interested in pronghorn. If I go down to my project name field, you can see that it filtered that project name list. So only the project names associated with pronghorn are now going to appear. Whereas if I didn't select anything, it's going to show me all of the project names for all of the species that we have. All right, next is the animal ID. I kind of went over this already, but you just type in your animal ID, that unique identifier. If you want to add multiple animals in your query, you just do comma and then the next animal ID. This same goes for the caller ID. Usually these are 6 digits. I think with the Argos, they might be a little bit different though. For sex, you can, if you don't select anything, it's going to default to selecting all female, male, and unknown sexes, or you can select the sex of interest. For the mortality field, so most of the collars have a mortality sensor, and when we get that data, it comes in as true and false. You can query based on that true and false record value. We default to querying for all true and false records though. The next option is the date range. So again, we have those predefined date ranges. If you want to set a custom one, you can select custom. And then in the calendar button here, you can change the year, the month, the day, and then you can also change the time. For this query though, I am just going to do the last 30 days. So this include mass data is a relatively new field that we added to the query builder. And so all the location data that's being displayed in Wildlife Tracker is based on the deployment and then the recovery date of that collar. And this is because we want to mask out all those outlier points. So say if the collar is traveling in a truck, or there's like 100 locations at Ken Hersey's house or something like that, we want to mask that out because that's not actually an animal moving. If you do want to see all those outlier points, all you have to do is click that check mark button, and it's going to include those locations in your query. Let's see, next is the project name. If you have a project name to help group your animals by, let us know and we can easily add that into Wildlife Tracker. Most of these are bighorn sheep, but yeah, if you have one, let us know. Current cohort is the current life stage of the animal. So you can query by only adults if you want to. Again, if nothing is selected, it's going to default to querying for all of the current cohort. Our capture units and capture subunits are all pretty much based on the wildlife management units layer, but this isn't a totally standardized list yet, but we are working on cleaning it up. And then we have the capture area field. So this is kind of like where that animal was generally captured. If it was by a creek or on private property, that would be the capture area field. All right, let's try running this query. So for this query, again, I am querying for all the locations that fall within this North Slope polygon for all species within the last 30 days. And we click execute. Awesome. So now we got all locations within the last 30 days in the North Slope unit. Now let's say I don't want to have to set that up again. So I don't want to have to open up the layer list, select the spatial filter for this North Slope polygon. What I can do is create a query name. So let's say North Slope last 30 days. And you can click Save Query. And then that's going to be saved in your Saved Queries tab. So when you click on the menu button for a saved query and you click Execute, it'll open up the query builder again, but it's going to pre-populate all those fields for you, so you don't ever have to set it up again. And then you can just click Execute again. So actually, let's just try running a previously saved query of mine, the Morgan Southridge query. And then you just click Execute. And there you go. That was one saved query that I had for all species that fall within the Morgan Southridge unit for the last 7 days. And then also with the saved queries, you can delete them if they're no longer useful to you. Okay, so every time that you run a query, what it does is it generates a layer in this layers list. So as you can see here, we have that last Morgan Southridge query turned on in my layers list. I can turn it off, and I can turn on that North Slope query right here. So that's query results 0 because that's the first query that I ran. If I want to just remove it because I think the layer list is too cluttered, all I have to do is go to the menu button here and remove the layer from my layers list. Let's turn back on my Morgan Southridge query. So when you run a query, it also generates a heat map. So you can toggle that on from the heat map from the layer list here. So if I click heat map, it's going to generate that heat map of the point locations. And to see it a little clearer, let's turn off the point locations. And there's a few things we can do from this heat map. We can click on the menu button. We can change the transparency of it. We can change the intensity of it. We can change the radius. We can change the threshold. And then we can zoom in. And then let's turn back on the point locations. Okay, and then from the results tab, there's a few other ways we can visualize our location data on the map. The first thing we can do is create an animation. So what you do again in the results tab, click on that menu button and click animate tracks. And there we go, cool animation of all the species in the last 7 days animated. And so when you turn this on, when you click animate, it's gonna pop up this animation toolbar. And there's a few things we can do to customize this animation. We can speed through the timestamps a little faster if we think it's running through it too slowly. Oh, I have to put it on loop. You can also put it on a loop here if you don't want it to ever stop playing. So here we go again. And playing through the timestamps a little bit faster. We can hide the icons by clicking on this hide icon button. So now we're only getting those track lines. We can turn off the track lines if we only want the icons by clicking on this show path button and hide path button. We can, if we don't want to see this calendar, we can just click hide calendar and we can open it up. In addition, if you click on this calendar, it'll open up another window just to kind of create a better visualization of the animation. And so it doesn't look so cluttered in the animation toolbar. We can also change the trackline colors. So to do that, you click this button called Choose Color. And you can select a color from here. Let's say I want to change all the trackline colors to green. And then you click Apply Color to All Tracklines. And just click Apply. And there we go. All of the tracklines are now green. And if you want to return to that default, which is just a random color for each individual animal, you just click Default. And then if you don't want to, maybe you want to just hide this animation toolbar because you're doing a screen recording and it doesn't look too nice, you can just click on this X button and it'll dock it on the left-hand side of your screen here. And then to get that back again, you just click on the animation toolbar. Okay, let's go back to the layers list and just turn back on my point location for the queries. And then we'll open up the query builder and then go to the results tab. And now we want to just create track lines for my query. So you just click open up the menu button, click create track lines, and then we can create track lines. And maybe we think this is also looking a little too cluttered. One thing that we can do is remove the arrows from the track lines. So you can click remove arrows. And so now it's only going to display the lines. And if we want to remove the track lines completely, you just click remove track lines. Let's say we only want to create track lines for an individual animal. Again, in the pop-up window, you can just click on a point of interest or animal of interest, and you can say create track lines. And now I've only created track lines for that one animal. Okay, the next way to kind of look at our location data that I queried is through the attribute table. So if I click on attribute table, it opens up in a table, so we can see it in a more tabular format. You can do a few things in this attribute table. You can show and hide columns. Maybe it's a little too busy and I'm only interested in looking at the date, time, and animal ID. You can also sort all this data based on these fields. So maybe I want to sort all the data in descending order based on the time. So I would just click on the field that I want to sort the data by. And then if I click a record in this attribute table, it's going to highlight where that record is on the map. So if I click on this first record, I can then see where that location is on the map. And if I want to clear it, I select clear selection. Or you can zoom to it or zoom to the query. And then to get rid of the attribute table, you just click on the bottom right-hand corner widget, which is the attribute table widget. Oh, let's clear that selection. All right, and then in this results tab, this is also where you'd have the ability to download data if your account has that enabled for you. And there's a few different options. You can download it as a CSV, KML, or a shapefile. All right, let's move on to the selection tool. So this is the next widget that we have available in our Wildlife Tracker app. It's this orange button on the bottom of the screen here. And what we can do is maybe I'm just interested in selecting like this group of clusters right here. What I would do is make sure that that layer is toggled on. And then you can select it based on a rectangle shape, a circle, or a polygon. So let's try drawing a polygon. And I'm just going to draw it around this cluster here. And then what this does is it's going to open up a new tab in our attribute table of only those points that I selected on the map, and then it's going to highlight those points on the map as well. And then again, to hide the attribute table, just click on that widget in the bottom right-hand corner. And then if you want to clear this selection, just click on this X button. All right, so we can also measure things in our mapping platform. So we can measure the distance between locations maybe. So to do this, you just click on the distance tool, and then to start, just click on the map. So I want to find the distance between this cluster, and then you double click to finish. And then we can change the unit to miles, to feet, whatever you want. And then you can just clear it by saying new measurement. You can also measure an area. So again, start by just clicking on the map, and then use your mouse to draw the new area that you want to measure. And then you can change the unit again. Okay, and then the last option that we have in our measurement tool is a location. So if I want to find a location, all I have to do is just drop a pin. And then this bottom record is what that lat long is of the point that I dropped. And as you can see, the top lat and long values are changing as I move my mouse across the screen. All right, the last tool that I wanted to show you all for this demonstration today is the Upload Layers tool. So this is this green button on the right-hand side of the widget bar here. And we have two different types of layers you can upload at the moment. Right now, you can either upload a KML file, or you can upload a zip shape file. And so, for example, if I uploaded a zip shape file, I'd have to browse to that file on my desktop. And so I click Browse File, and then navigate to where I saved some shapefile examples. And so there's a few different types of file types that need to be in a shapefile. The minimum are the DBFs, shape, and SHX, and I think the projection file too. But it has to be all zipped up so you can upload it into Wildlife Tracker. So we are going to upload the Utah Airports shapefile. All right, so now we have my airports uploaded on the map. And so now that I have this uploaded, I don't ever have to upload it again. So if I close out of this Wildlife Tracker session and reopen it, it's going to be saved underneath my Save Layers tab. And as you can see, I've uploaded Utah parks in the past, and that's going to be displayed down here. There's a few things you can do from the Save Layers, and you can click on the menu button, change the transparency, and disable pop-ups, or you can just delete that layer if you no longer need it in your uploaded layers tool. All right, I think that's all I had for the demonstration for today, because I want to make sure we have time to talk about what's coming soon and open the floor to some questions. Daniel, do you want to touch on a little bit more about enhancements coming?
Sure. So I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, that the next big thing that we want to work on as far as Wildlife Tracker goes is enriching the data. And so we want to add information that you guys find valuable, that would help you do your jobs better. So for instance, if you wanted to know what elevation a group of elk are generally at during a certain time of year, by enriching the data, we can make it easy for you to answer that question through a few clicks. So that's what we'll be working on now, is adding that contextual information into the database, so you can answer questions like that. How close are my animals to the road generally? How far are they from water? those type of things could be answered on the fly really quickly. So the help that we'll need for this part of it is to know what information that you would like to see. So what GIS layers can we use to enrich the data that you know about that would help you answer the questions that you have. So we're putting together a list right now of those type of layers, but please contact us if you got specific needs, so we don't miss anything, because we really want to make this as useful as we can for as many people as possible. In the short term, before this part of it's done, we can add those type of GIS layers to Wildlife Tracker really easily. So you could run a query for your animals and look at those animal locations on top of a GIS layer. That only takes us a couple minutes to add layers to the list that Jesse was showing you. So if you're looking through that layer list, you're not seeing what you want, let us know. We'll get that added so you can have that information. But yeah, so that'll be the next big thing, and I think it'll be really make the data. We made a big step forward on being able to visualize data, and this will be the next big step forward to really understanding what's happening in the visualizations that we're looking at. Jesse, is there anything else you want me to mention?
No, I think that was great. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I guess we've got quite a bit of time left, so we can open the floor to questions. Buck, did anything come through?
Yeah, we've got a few questions from the audience. I think first one is from Eric Miller, just wondering if you did get your map working or if we need to follow up with you later, Eric. And then another question about if a hunter harvests a collared animal and asks for information on the animal, can we share anything with them? If so, what is okay to share?
Yeah, that's a good question. Buck, who asked that one? Where'd that one come from?
Levi Watkins.
Oh, okay, good question, Levi. So that's a situation that has come up a couple times in the past. So I think the best way to navigate that is to you can probably share a heat map with them. So don't share point location data, but you could generate a heat map that just shows generally where that animal lived. And for most people, that will satisfy their curiosity. But the hard thing would be is some hunters wound animals and then they want to know where their wounded animal is at. And that situation is a lot trickier to navigate. That's one where we shouldn't be providing the animal's location to a hunter who's wounded an animal who's trying to recover it. All right, I think that's good for that question. Unless you have a follow-up, Levi, does that make sense?
Cool. We've got another one from Rhett asking if we can add the Nature Conservancy's landscape forecasting data where available. I think from my understanding of the TNC landscape forecasting data that we can add it, but it's so broad, we would need to know what specifically we want added. You know, what species are we looking at? What kind of seasons? I think there's a lot of nuances to that LCF data, so it's hard to make it into a single layer. But please reach out to us if you'd like. We can explore that more on the GIS team. Any other questions? If anyone would like to just chime in and ask, that's okay, or raise your hands and we can call on you.
Daniel, Jesse, can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Tal Abgov from Utah State University. First of all, thank you very much for this presentation and for all the work that your team is doing on Wildlife Tracker. I think this is an amazing application. It really is. Stands out compared to a lot of other things that I see nationally and internationally. The question is my usual question. When I think I'm bugging you with this question every time that we talk. When do you think we'll have the functionality of scripting downloads rather than doing it through the GUI? I'm mainly talking about projects that need to update the data every now and a while, and would like to automate that process.
That's a great question, Tal. That is something we can incorporate in the next development phase of Wildlife Tracker. That'll be a few months down the road when we get going on that. But yeah, I think for some folks like your students and yourself, who are really sophisticated coders, that would be a nice feature for you to be able to run your queries that way. Jesse, I don't think we've totally fleshed out how to do that yet.
Yeah, one other option is if the university has a GCP project or something like that, we can easily set you guys up access for you to download data that way, so you don't have to go through our Wildlife Tracker app.
That's great. We'll
talk about that up.
Yeah, we can look into setting that up. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, that would be a really easy way for us to share data with you.
Yeah, thanks,
We've
Jesse.
we've got another question from Joel Berger. For the generation of heat maps, how can I find out more about the programs used to generate the distributions?
That's a good question. So it's some type of algorithm that's creating the smooths around the points. That's what creates the heat map. But what exact algorithm that is, I'm not sure. Jesse, are we able to find the documentation for that so we can let
Yeah,
Joel
I
know?
can probably find it and get back to you, Joel.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Any other questions out there from the audience? I've got one I think it's more something just to bring up. What are the export limits on shapefiles and KMLs as far as number of records?
Yeah, good question. There is a limit. I don't know the number of records off the top of my head, other than that if it exceeds like 265 megabytes, I think is what I have written down. So it can't really handle really large shape files right now. If you want to upload a really large shape file, what you'd have to do is publish it to ArcGIS Online and then add it to the layer list for the meantime until we have that ability to add URLs in the file upload tool.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. So just to clarify, if it's a large shapefile and it's not working when you're trying to upload it, you'll just need to contact Jesse or myself, and then we'll add it in the main layer list, and you'll be able to access it that way.
Thank you. And then I might have said upload when I meant to say download. What are some of the limitations on how many points we can download from our queries?
So Buck, good question. For most folks, most folks will just be viewing the data. You won't have a need to download it probably. But if you are downloading, you have that option turned on. I think that Jesse will have to remind me, but I feel like we're getting close to like 10 million points could be downloaded in one download. What will happen is it will create a series of files. So each file will have 1 million points in it, and it'll progress through that query until all the points are downloaded in. But there's a cap to that, so I think it's around 10 million where it won't work anymore. Does that sound right, Jesse?
Yeah, that number might be a little high. It might be more like 5 or 6 million. But it also kind of can vary depending on what type of machine you're on. If you've got a really high performance laptop, you might be able to download more locations in a CSV file.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the bottleneck is on the user's end, what type of machine they're trying to do it on. So I might have been able to do a little bit larger, quick downloads because of the computer I was using.
I'd also just like to add for everyone out there that this wildlife tracker tool is a great place to explore all of the different GIS data that we may use as biologists. We've got lots of different maps across the division, but everything really comes together well in the wildlife tracker platform, and is probably the best place to go right now for a robust web GIS information system. We've got a question from Allison. Go ahead.
Actually more of a statement, but some of the things that we've discussed as far as the WRI administrative team, we would love to see this kind of data included in proposals in the future. So this last year we had a few people use it, and it really made a difference in presentation to the group. It was just great data. So those of you that are involved with the WRI program, start using it. It's good stuff.
Allison, were they using animations or heat maps, or what type of products were they including?
Mostly heat maps, but they were able to show previous treatments and additional more use in those areas than was previously seen, and then showing areas where the animals were but wanted to do more work and hopefully improve the habitat for them in those areas. Also using migration corridors too to kind of determine where to focus their projects on.
Got it. Thanks, Allison. I appreciate you sharing
that. We've got one more question in the chat from Kezia Manlove. Is there any push to do attribute fixes with directly observed data where those exists? We have data like that and align them with downloaded fixes, but I could see, not quite sure that, I can't quite understand that question. Does that make sense to you, Daniel?
I think Kezia is asking, so outside of GPS tracking, if we're just observing where animals are at and recording their locations, if that can be added to Wildlife Tracker, I think that might be what she's asking.
Yeah, I'm curious. We have things like group size and composition and reproductive status on collared animals that we get from direct observation of those animals in the field. And it seems like there could be utility in sticking those attributes onto the fixed data, because it would let you like contrast animals that are reproductively active versus not, or, you know, groups of different sizes. And so right now we just kind of have those data and stick them onto the fixes later. But I was curious if you guys are thinking about trying to, you know, incorporate those in so they're stored together in Wildlife Tracker with all the other location data.
Kezia, that's a great point. That's a perfect illustration of when we go about this next phase of enriching the data. Those are the type of things we want to be doing. So we'll reach out to you on that to make sure we're capturing that type of data. I know on the big game side, we have another IT project happening right now. They're building a database that will consolidate a bunch of that same type of information that we take on deer and elk and other species. So it'll be much easier for our systems to be built so they talk to each other and we can enrich data with that exact type of information. Yeah, thanks, Kezia. That was a great comment.
I don't see anything else coming in from outside. You guys are ready to close.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks everyone for attending. For all the DNR employees. We host Buck hosts GIS office hours. I think is it every first Monday of the month?
The third Monday of the month, I believe.
Okay, the third Monday of every month. And I'll also be attending those office hours. And same with Rihanna. If you guys have any questions about Wildlife Tracker or need help figuring out what's going on with the collar, we'll be there and happy to help answer any questions that you have. All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for attending. Jesse, thank you. Great job.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Good job, Jesse. Thanks, everyone.